So Brian emailed me the program for today a couple days ago and said, hey, just make sure this looks right. And so I skimmed through it, but of course I didn't proofread any of the parts that I had written. And I found out after the fact that he had snuck in something about me being a salsa dancer. That's not true. Because I'm from Spain and salsa is from Cuba. Just a history lesson, Brian. I'm just kidding. No, I can't dance. We have an historian here. I did have an old Spanish woman once teach me how to flamenco dance a little bit, but that's another story for another day. So first of all, I want to say thank you to everyone here in Trinidad who's made us feel so welcome. I grew up in Rye, and so I've been to Trinidad several times, but usually in the interest of beating Trinidad at some type of high school sport. So I honestly didn't appreciate how wonderful. And actually, I think I was telling Guillermo, if he's still here, about how I actually got a concussion once because of Trinidad. I'm not sure if it was the JV game or the varsity game the night before or the JV game on Saturday, but I don't remember. I remember warming up to play against Trinidad. I remember getting off the bus on Saturday the next morning. I don't remember anything in between. So what I've missed of Trinidad, I am making up for. It's an amazing place. You guys are doing an amazing job. You have amazing ambassadors here in your leadership all the way around. So Sarah asked me to talk about what we can do better in education. And let me explain to you the irony of that. Well, one, we're at a college, and you guys know way more about education than I do. Two, I was that kid in school. I got pretty good test scores, but I believe I finished second to last in my class in GPA. And my high school guidance counselor still twitches every time she sees me, almost 20 years later. So I took the roundabout way to get my education. I actually have a couple of master's degrees now, mostly because I couldn't decide what I wanted to be when I grew up. And in my professional life, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of people about how to build better teams, how to work better with people, how to get the most out of individual talents to contribute to a team. And so I look at it from that perspective, more of a business mindset. How can we be better education? So this topic, this idea that Sarah had me address, came out of a lot of conversations I've had recently, the past several months, with teachers, with school district leaders, with parents, with people in my own family, and even experiences with my own children. My sister, Rachel, I'm going to give a little brief story here just in the interest of time. Her oldest son is an incredibly athletic kid. Tall, good-looking kid, very smart. But pretty early on in school, he was having a lot of trouble with his classes, and his teachers would, call in to the parents and say, he's really struggling, and they say, what can we do? And they say, well, we don't know, kind of a thing. Found out later, finally a teacher said, I think he has a learning disability. You should get him tested. So they took him in, got tested. They took him up to Denver somewhere and paid a ridiculous amount of money to be told that he was pretty severely dyslexic. And so my sister, after years of trying to figure out, how do I help my son? How do we get him, the help he needs? Gets all excited because now we have a diagnosis. So she goes back into the school and says, guys, great news, I found out that Tanner has dyslexia, so we can help him. And the teacher literally looked at my sister and said, yeah, we know. We've known for a long time, we just couldn't tell you that. Jeez. And I've had that experience a few times. I worked with an organization that specifically provides services for adults who are diversely abled. And so you see this a lot, where people don't know, and teachers can't tell them. Now there is some legalese built into that of why they can't tell them. I told Connie Haas this story the other night, and she said, well, that wouldn't happen in a small town. We would tell them. And I believe she's absolutely right. Yeah, we'd tell them. I grew up in a tiny town. My teachers would call my dad personally and say, hey, Micah's not in school. You should come down here and talk to him. So they would have known. But it's kind of a weird microcosm of what we actually look at here in Colorado. We've seen it several times. We're Team Colorado. We all want to work together. We all want to push in the same direction. But there's this weird rural-urban divide. And so the way things happen versus rural and urban are just different. So I was talking with District 70, and this is something, and maybe it's the way I was raised. I was always taught, if you don't know something, go look it up. To this day, it bothers me if I don't know something. I have to look it up. Google's like my best friend. And so one of the biggest things I can't stand hearing is, well, I didn't know that. I never knew that. People like to kind of it's a weird way to pass the buck. I never knew that. And so, of course, in the education system, we hear that a lot. I was working, like I said, with this group that provides services for adults with different disabilities. And in that time, we met a lot with some of the school districts up in Pueblo. And we would talk to them about waivers, what waivers you have to have when you're in school, what waivers you have to apply for before you leave high school. And we'd have teachers say, I never knew that. We'd have guidance counselors say, I never knew that. We had parents say, I never knew that. So I'm running a little bit short of time, so just to kind of cut to the chase, I wanted to encourage you guys. I've been very uplifted today by the messages, by the team spirit that's been shown here today, by everyone wanting to work together. But it's the weirdest thing when people say, I never knew that. What I want to encourage you to do is to know when and where to pick a fight. Our education system, Colorado's a funny one to say because how do we fix education in Colorado? Colorado has the 5th best education system in Colorado. They're really good. And I get it mixed up. It's a composite score of pre-K through 12 and college education. One of them is actually 5th and one of them 7th, but as a composite score, as a state, we rank 5th. In funding, depending on which accountant you want to talk to, we're anywhere between 37th and 48th in funding. Now, everyone in this room has a strong appreciation, I know. Whether you live in a small town or not, you have an appreciation for the fact that people in rural communities absolutely know how to do more with less. The education system for Colorado is a microcosm of Colorado itself. We do more with less. We perform admirably with very limited resources. The problem is, the way it's funded, we get really left behind. And these kids with disabilities, like my nephew who has dyslexia, never knew that, and the school doesn't pay for anything like that. Luckily, my sister and her husband were in a position financially, they could afford to get that test done. A lot of families aren't that fortunate. So those kids go through life with people maybe knowing what the issue is, but never telling them. And so they end up going out the world saying, I never knew that. It's an abysmal demonstration of where we are falling short. Education is critical. Education is important for all of us. That's why even though I hated school, I went for most of my life to get an education, so I would know things. But when it comes to education for these kids who are being left behind, the way the funding is set up, you guys, most of you are going to be way more well-educated about Amendment 23 and the BS factor, which might be the most aptly named piece of legislation of all time. But that's where they take money out of education to pay for other stuff. That disproportionately affects those kids with learning disabilities. So as far as, in the interest of time, like I said, I had a bunch of other stories to share with you, but I want you guys who are in this room, who want to see things improve, I want to tell you where to make sure you pick a fight. If you see things that come up that are going to affect education disproportionately for kids in rural areas, for kids with different learning abilities, that's where we all need to kind of take a stand and make sure that Colorado doesn't just look good on paper, that we truly are better, that we truly are one of the best places in the country to be. I know we all believe that, and that's one more place where you can prove it. Thank you.